Hey folks, this is your AI Bootcamp and Joan on the mic. I'm talking to you today about the Bootcamp. Heck yeah, it's going to be an amazing opportunity to do an intensive deep dive onto your personal brand and steps to get you to your next stage of your AI career journey. In fact, using AI and weekly coaching, templates, frameworks, guidance, and an amazing group of people that you're going to be going through the cohort with. Check it out at yourairoadmap.com/career. Hi, my name is Joan Palmer-Bajorek. I'm on a mission to decrease fluffy hype and talk about the people actually building an AI. Anyone can build an AI, including you. Whether you're terrified or excited, there's been no better time than today to dive in. Now is the time to be curious and future-proof your career, and ultimately, your income. This podcast isn't about white dudes patting themselves on the back. This is about you and me and all the paths into cool projects around the world. So what's next on your AI roadmap? Let's figure it out together. You ready? This is Your AI Roadmap, the podcast. Hey folks, this is Joan. I wanted to just talk to you a little bit before the episode. This is a really cool one about voice technology. I met Rana a few years ago and really appreciated how he was translating work from R&D, from the research and development labs, directly to business outcomes. He's a savvy businessman. He really thinks about the numbers, fiscal returns, a very data-driven way, but also you'll hear they throw out words. Like they focus on other pieces of voice technology that is such an unusual perspective in the field. As someone like me who comes from speech technology from a let's learn every word perfectly in every different language, I really just love learning from other people and other perspectives. And I think you're going to love this episode. So you ready? Let's dive in. Hello, hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How about
How are you?
you?
Good.
Glad to have you on the podcast. Thanks for joining us.
I'm glad to be here and thanks for having me.
Totally. Well, can we start with one of those, my name is blah and I work at blah?
Yeah, so we could do that. My name is Rana Gujral and I am the CEO of Behavioral Signals. And we're having a lot of fun at Behavioral Signals.
Yeah. What do you all do at Behavioral Signals?
So we're doing a few different things, but the way I see what we're doing, contributing and building essential building blocks of AGI in some meaningful, differentiated ways. To better describe what we do, we're focused on various emotional, behavioral, and mental constructs. So these are sort of state and frames of minds. And it's essentially taking a specific modality and digging deeper into that. And our focus area from day one, and I'd say also claim to fame, has been sort of cracking some of these early models that extract these signals from the tone, which is the non-verbal cues in a conversation. The pitch and tonal variants, intonations, prosody, among other things. So to better describe our technology, so in a real live conversation, just like we're having right now, and it could be a multi-party conversation, we're extracting signals primarily focused on the tone. And the signals that we extract can roughly be put in three different buckets. First, there's the bucket of emotions. So anger, happiness, sadness, and there's a whole range of other emotions we can tap into. Then there's the bucket of behaviors. This is engagement, empathy, politeness, etc. And then the last bucket is probably the most interesting bucket, because this is sort of a collection of advanced classifiers that are tapping into more advanced and complex mental states. So this is where you're looking at, someone's level of experience or the level of satisfaction with the other party live in the moment. So think of this as a live NPS score, but also other things such as stress, distress, duress, control. Control is really fun and interesting because, you say you're saying something, but you're like not wanting to say it, but you're being made to say it. Like you could have a gun on your head. Can you see if you could detect that? And other things such as intent markers, so predicting an intent to do an action or intent to not do an action. So really predicting how a person is going to act based on what they're saying in a defined use case, obviously. So that's really the core technology. What we do with that technology is two different things. We have two primarily sort of parallel focus areas. One is we've built advanced tools to improve the experience in call centers, and we can talk about what that product is and how do we do that. But we also in parallel work with the government agencies. Incutel, which is actually the CIA's VC firm, is one of our investors. And with that, we were sort of involved in some very interesting use cases that are mostly sort of centered around national security, law enforcement, among other things, and really essentially leveraging the same building blocks of us understanding human cognition and behavior and solving for other things. So those sort of two parallel focus areas that we do operate in the defense sector. But also we have very unique products, I'd say. I mean, they're in many ways first of its kind as to what we do in the call center space.
Very cool. Gosh. Okay. You're just like dropping nuggets. That's amazing. Well, and I want to make sure we'll talk about different pieces of your technology, but just breaking it down for someone who's listening, and they might say, okay, you can hear, or it sounds like your technology understands if someone is angry or something, and how we can make that actionable. Is that is that a summary?
That's one of many things that is possible by a technology like this. So if you think about, so first off, emotions, behaviors, and cognition are all very diverse and involved spaces in their own, right. But if you take one of those areas, emotions, and emotions, the technical word for emotions would be affect. That's what we would call it in the academia. It in itself is very, very complex because as a human, we express emotions in multiple different modalities. But modalities, what I mean is form factors in some ways. So you could express emotions by what you're saying, the actual words that you're choosing to use, or your facial expressions, or your body language. And sometimes by not saying anything, you're expressing emotions. And also very much so from your tone. And they're all useful in their own ways. But the one big aspect that had eluded this industry was the tone. It's the hardest to do, and it also has the biggest prize because it's very visceral. It's very hard to fake or hide. You could say something and mean 5 different things. So if you're relying on just a spoken word, you're not going to get an accurate assessment. But also, you're trying to really get what the person is trying to project, and really trying to understand and understand the psyche of the person and how they're actually feeling. And you could do those things by tapping into these other modalities such as the intonations, prosody, tone of voice. And so when you're looking at anger is just one of the emotions, right? So you could tap into that. And anger is actually one of the easy ones. Then there are ones that are not so easy.
Well, and I'm a linguist, got a PhD in this field. Can you break down a little bit for other people kind of what tone means, if there are tonal languages? Just a little explanation on that one.
Yeah. So tone is really, when we're speaking, where the voice is ebbing and flowing. There's a lot of wavelengths in terms of sort of how the voice resonates and those sort of the intonations. And then it's also, how fast we speak and how many pauses we take. And that sort of gives a unique flavor to each utterance that we make. And none of that is really directly linked to what we're saying, because you could be saying whatever and still have that variability in your tone, in your prosody levels, in your pauses, in your speed of how you're delivering it. And a very interesting fact is our core technology can really function just as good in any language data set without any modifications. And so it's really truly language agnostic from a perspective that these models that are extracting these signals, which is emotions, behaviors, and these other complex signals that I just described, are not just limited to a specific data set that model is trained on or understands, which is really true for typical speech recognition systems or the voice to text and ASR based emotion recognition systems, because you build a model for English. Well, that model is useless if you're going to apply it for Chinese. You have to build a model for Chinese. Now, the way it works for intonations is when you're looking at marking a specific signal, and let's say you're trying to pinpoint if I'm trying to detect anger in someone's voice. The way that typically works is there's a baseline that is created for a specific data set, and then there's those points of inflection from the baselines that you can measure. And those points of inflections are very specific to the signals that you're trying to measure. So, for example, if you're throwing those signals on the chart and see where it lands on that map, and when it lands at a specific point, you know it's anger, and it's that's really how you measure anger. Now, what would happen for a language that is a tonal language? So, a tonal and a non-tonal language would be one that, like, for example, some of the Asian languages, tonal languages, your speech is speaking in more higher pitch tones, and some of the other languages are more sort of softer undertones. Is that the baseline shifts, and you could recalibrate that baseline for a new data set with very small amounts of data. And once you've done that, those signals drop at the same points of inflection. It's really magical. It's almost sort of like whatever code we're running on as humans, it's the same code. The base files are the same. And you can sort of see this, like, we have a lot of differences in our culture and how we speak, the languages, and it look very, very different to the untrained eye. But when you go behind the veil and you look at sort of like how the engine's working, and now you can detect that using AI, a lot of what we're doing using AI is also understanding how the human brain works. That's a whole different conversation we can have. So you look at that and you're like, okay, well, you recalibrated the baseline for Chinese data set, and the signals are dropping at the same point of inflection. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. But that also enables this capability to be truly language agnostic. Spoken word does not matter. In fact, we don't process a spoken word at all. We do not use ASR or speech to text in any of our models. What you're saying is not relevant. It doesn't give us any information that we require. We can get into your state of mind, your emotional, behavioral, cognition construct simply by a tone. It's
wow.
magical.
And probably people are listening to this and they're like, no words? Like the words don't matter? Like I think a lot of people might be very surprised to hear that. But I think what's really helpful is we can build these type of tools, right? You've very sophisticated. You've been working in this company, I think, several years now. But how, I'm sure you can't tell us some of the CIA use cases maybe, but broadly, how might a government, can you give an example of how this is actionable or helpful to different entities?
Yeah. So, on the government side, obviously, the interest areas are around different use cases. A capability like this allows you a deeper insight into a human's psyche, state of mind, various behavioral, emotional, both macro states and the micro states, which is what is the state in the moment right now versus who you are as a person, and other things that sort of play from that. And so there's a lot of use cases that, that sort of play into the areas of benchmarking a behavioral dynamic of a human that you're interacting with over a period of time. Once you've benchmarked it, you've understood based on your frequent interactions with that person, you can then monitor for unique or concerning variances from that benchmark. So that's a use case. You're also looking at various aspects of detecting intent to harm, whether that be level of trustworthiness, or whether that be intent to fraud or something else. Those use cases become very relevant in law enforcement. And also deepfakes. We're one of the first companies to build a live deepfake detector that can both understand deepfakes in a situation where you're creating a deepfake to imitate a known person, like it could be a person who's well known, famous, or it's just a voice clip that doesn't necessarily belong to anybody important or someone but it's not real. In both cases, we can detect deepfakes from audio. And those are big problems that actually are big problems today, but for the most part, it's not really in the mainstream yet in terms of a concern bucket. But there will be soon because the technology is there and it's being misused already, and you need a counter to that. So there are a whole variety of use cases that play into the defense ecosystem, aside from what I mentioned. Now, what we do on the call center side is something super interesting. So our technology allows us to create what we call a conversational bioprint or a behavioral profile of a person based on a previous interaction or a recent interaction. It doesn't have to be a long interaction. It could be a short 1 to 2 minute interaction, audio interaction, and that allows us to create this profile. This profile or the bioprint is a complex amalgam of about 75 to 100 attributes that range from how the person speaks, fast, slow, various emotional behavioral states that are unique to that person. And you put it all together, it represents how that person converses with a different person. And it's their sort of, that's what we call the conversation bioprint. So there's a few things to remember about this bioprint. One, it's fairly comprehensive, so it gives a deep, information into your conversational dynamic, which is not necessarily your state of mind in the moment, but it's like this is your dynamic based on the person you are overall. And so it's sort of like, it's like a macro assessment. Second, it's unique to you as a fingerprint is unique to you, which means there are no two bioprints that are identical or similar or exactly the same. So yours is as unique as you, right? And that's an interesting thing, which, wasn't really understood previously. And the third part is that because it's unique to you, and it's not necessarily a question of whether it's a good bioprint or a bad bioprint. Is it a good fingerprint? No. Fingerprint is a fingerprint, and it's unique to you. You're either clashing with someone's bioprint or matching someone's bioprint on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day, every time you're interacting with someone, like this conversation we're having right now. So there's an aspect of compatibility or, non-compatibility that comes into play every time you're speaking or interacting with someone. And most times it doesn't matter, but sometimes it matters a lot. Specifically in a business conversation or in a call center interaction, where there's aspects of either specific goals that you're trying to hit or experience that you're trying to deliver. And so if you can create these bioprints on the fly, for both parties, you would have a list of predefined matches in the system that allow you to pair that person or the incoming call with their one-to-one match that has been pre-selected for them. That gives them a better chance for a better outcome and have a better experience overall. They're just going to build natural rapport, natural affinity towards each other because their bioprints are matching versus randomly matched to someone that could match or completely clash. You just don't know. So I think that's a use case. So we were the first to build a product like that, which we were the first to market. And now we're using it to sort of deliver a much more improved one. It's a better experience, but also it significantly improves all the KPI that the industry cares about, whether that be revenue increase or increasing in sales or customer satisfaction or faster, better debt collection, improving first call resolution. All of these things are extremely important for that call center industry, and the technology makes that possible.
Yeah. Well, I think I remember on your website or otherwise, there was a case study related to debt collection.
Yes.
That was a huge percentage better. Can you share a little bit about that one or something similar?
Yeah, so the one that you're referring to is an implementation we did at a large public bank in an EU nation. This happened to be actually their largest public bank in the EU nation, and they had a very sort of standard team dealing with their clients that were falling behind on payments or mortgages, etc. So this particular use case was pertaining to a call center that was focused on really sort of talking to these people who are falling behind and they're in trouble, and negotiating a loan restructuring engagement, whether that's payments or terms or whatever that is, so that it doesn't completely go into default. And that's a complex, also very emotion-filled engagement that happened. So this was actually one of our first deployments. At that time we had sort of barely built this engine and we're looking for an opportunity to sort of test this in real life deployment. And we did a champion challenger setup where we separated all the call center agents participated in the test, but the clients were split into a control group and a test group. What that means is like there's a bioprint for every client, but some of the clients will be matched by AI, and some of those clients will just be thrown into this random pool of who our agent picks up, which is business as usual. And what we saw we didn't know, we knew we could improve things, but we didn't know how much could it improve. What came out of that implementation was just mind-boggling. What we saw was Now, there was a net 22% improvement in loan restructuring success by the agents who were matched by AI. In specific numbers, I mean, that translates into dollars saved or earned by the bank. That translated into almost $1.5 million of additional generated revenue per agent per year. And so they had about 130, 140 agents in that test. And so you're looking at, $400 million of upside created by this software that is just matching the right people and nothing else changes. Like, so for example, you're not hiring any different people, the same people. You're not training them differently. There's the same use case, same training. In fact, agents have no idea if anything is different. I mean, they're just simply answering the call as routed to them, and just simply by getting the right two people together versus just a random matchup, which is really how the vast majority of the world's call centers are still run, we're able to create $400 million upside for that bank. So it was really, really powerful, and it was like really mind-boggling. And it's not surprising because,
incredible.
Yeah, it's not surprising. When you're clashing with someone or matching with someone, right? I mean, like, for example, we've all been in two situations, and I'm sure you have, Joanne. I mean, so like, one would be, let's say you're, having this tense, controversial discussion. Maybe let's pick politics, like with a family member or a friend or someone. And so you're like trying to push your point of view. And let's say you walk out of that discussion without necessarily feeling like you succeeded. You didn't change the person's mind or whatever the situation was. I mean, it was tense, but you feel really good about that engagement and dialogue. You're like, you know what? I wasn't able to change his or her mind, but I feel good about that conversation. And the second situation could be you just met somebody at a party or a business event, and you're not trying to discuss politics. It's nothing controversial. You're just having normal chit chat. But in like 5 minutes, it's like, oh, someone saved me. I mean, I can't take this. And so in the first case, even though it's a complex conversation, your bioprints match, which means you're just having fun. There's natural rapport. Doesn't matter what the outcome is. And the second one, your bioprints are clashing. It's just the way the other person's speaking. It's just not matching yours, right? I mean, people sometimes who speak very thoughtfully and slowly, are not going to have or be able to have a long conversation with someone who's just flying off the handle. But if you're one of those, I mean, you just speak fast and think fast. I mean, you're like, you can't stand someone who's just like taking like 6 seconds between every utterance, right? And so I'm just saying, I mean, so those things matter on a daily basis. And I'm just using a very simple speed example, but there's an emotional behavioral element in there. And so if you bring those two people together in a business setting, you could have a much, much better impact where you have a choice to do so.
Oh, absolutely. I'm thinking back to different Lyft driver conversations, bad happy hours. I'm getting some flashbacks here.
Yeah.
So what you're saying for this bank, though, also, and I think, let me just break it down for folks who are listening to, and call centers may or may not be people's domain. So like I'm calling in and I have to negotiate this very sensitive topic about my mortgage, blah, blah, blah. And I could get matched up with Tina. I could get matched up with Tom, let's say. And you're saying maybe speech patterns or kind of my speech print. I forgot exactly how you said it. I know I match way better with Tom.
We call it the voice bioprint.
Voice bioprint. I match way better with Tom for whatever reason. There's a 22% difference if I get matched up with Tina versus Tom. And Tina and Tom don't even know. They're just getting these calls from people to negotiate. Is that what's going down?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, when you're matched with a person who your bioprint's compatible with, you as a client will have a much better experience. If the person on the other line does exactly the same as the person you're clashing in terms of says the same thing, does exactly the same thing, you're still going to feel better dealing with the person one than person two, which is also unfair to person two, but you feel better. You feel respected, you feel engaged, you feel you have a natural rapport and affinity. And so you feel good. So that translates into better experience for you. Second, because the other person who's also matched well with you feels the same, you're going to come to a resolution quicker. You're just going to like each other more. And which means, of course, it's good for the business. You don't have to have a second call, third call. First call is good, or the second call is good. You don't have to have the third call or the fourth call, and the business is solved. But also the agent feels better about their job. You feel better. It's a win-win across the board. And in net numbers, I mean, that translates into, I mean, you're looking at, I mean, different companies care about different KPIs. Some are very centered around, hey, we're focused on customer experience, right? So how much can you improve it? Or we're focused on FCR or, average handle time. And generally what we see is that, at any level, like, you're seeing double digits improvements, anywhere from 12% to 20% improvement in these KPIs. Now, there are a lot of AI products. They may not all be AI. They call themselves AI, but there are a lot of software products the ones which claim to improve the dynamic in a call center. And typically the impact is like 1%, 2%, 3%, 5%. And those are big numbers in the industry. And so when we come to market, and we came to market with 12 to 15%, the first pushback from everybody else was, okay, you just this doesn't make sense. I mean, it's not true. And so we literally had to do pilots. It's like, okay, well, let's measure based on your measurements. And it was like, it's mind boggling. And all you're doing is bringing the right people together, and you're not like looking at changing anything else. So it can sit on top of whatever you're doing. And the best part is, you could put this in a call center that is having, if you think about most non-English speaking countries, you're actually speaking in at least two languages at the same time. I mean, you're using English words with your native language. And so you're sort of like mixing those two things in there. And a lot of those sort of engines that are built on, the spoken word just fall apart at that point. And also you just don't have high quality data in every language set. So they're very specific to sort of, okay, my system works for English, but the English that is being spoken in this call center is not really English. I mean, it kind of sounds like English, but it's not really English. So if it's a tone of voice capability, it just works across the board, which is another cool advantage.
Absolutely. I think what I'm hearing also is that this AI enablement makes humans have a better human interaction.
Yes.
Like this AI augmenting a humanity. Yeah.
Better human connection.
So cool.
I mean, AI is now helping us make better, more human-like connections with other fellow humans. So the goal here is not to create an AI that pretends to be like a human, and now you're trying to build a relationship with this human who actually the thing that you think is a human, but it's not a human. No, I mean, here is like, okay, helping humans be more human and build more empathetic and more, interesting connections with each other. Because we're unique. And, there's always an aspect. If you're going to have things that are unique, you're going to have aspects of compatibility. You're just not going to be equally compatible with everybody else. We know that, right? Everybody knows that. And so how's that different in a business setting? It's the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about relationships, I found, in business. Okay, I want to eventually get to your background and how you got here. But when you think about this technology, where do you see the future of this side of the field heading?
So I think, one, we're keeping an eye out on the goal that we have ahead of ourselves, especially the folks in the AI space, which is AGI, right? So we're working towards that. We're all working in small ways towards that, building pieces towards that. And this capability, or these, I'd say, models, these engines, or what you're going to call them, are essential to eventually getting to a point where you say you've got into AGI. And no AI, whether it can crunch numbers or write beautiful prose and poetries, or do complex math, or even reasoning, can eventually reach AGI if it can't understand emotions, behaviors, cognition, state of mind like a human brain does. Because the goal of AGI is to do almost everything as good, if not better, than what a human does. And these things are incredibly important. So that's one. So it's a very essential piece of that puzzle, without which you can't get to AGI. So we're glad that we're playing a role in that space, and we've built pieces that are going to be an absolute essential component to that larger AGI experience. Second, it is also a very important aspect of an intelligent AI, because emotions and behaviors, and the ability to understand emotions and behaviors, are a very fundamental piece of intelligence, or part of intelligence. In fact, there's a very famous quote from Marvin Minsky, one of the founding fathers, where someone asked him if machines, or intelligent machines, should have the ability to understand or reflect emotions. more from a ethical morality standpoint. I think that's what how the question was asked. And I think his answer was interesting because he was like, okay, well, that's question's fundamentally flawed. You can't say, should an intelligent AI have the ability to understand emotions? Because can that AI be even considered intelligent if it doesn't understand emotions? So it's an aspect of intelligence, right? I mean, if you don't do that, you're just not, your ability is not really intelligent enough. So I think, but okay, keeping those things aside, there are brilliant experiences for us to have, right? So if you have, we're interacting with our devices around ourselves, including our cars and other things, that using our voice and ability to understand my state of mind allows me to have a much better experience. But also, like if you take a simple thing as, like a voice assistant, a voice assistant can do commands, act on commands. It can do the basic NLP and NLU, which is understanding the language and doing a search and then processing the response back in a human speaking form. You can do all of that, but it can't do a simple thing as hold a conversation. You can't hold a conversation because you can't hold a conversation is a much higher bar, as simple as that might sound. To hold a conversation, you need to understand the other person's state of mind in the moment. Otherwise, you're just rambling on things that are going to end the conversation very, very quickly. So to hold even like a 2-minute conversation, you need to understand the emotional, behavioral state of mind, which is what our human brain does effortlessly. So if you now have, AI makes that possible for a non-human to do it, whether that be a voice assistant or it could be a car, or it could be, a point of sale device, you're just going to have better experiences. You can actually, and maybe even build these voice assistants that are actually your voice assistant. You could literally, use that entity as an assistant and hold a conversation, have a conversation, and have a much more complex use cases can bring to fruition. So there's a lot of different things you could do. But there's also emotion behavioral AI has use cases and impact in healthcare on other dynamics of human experiences, which are beyond call centers, obviously. And so there's a lot of different things, a lot of applications that become possible. As are, the industry is already applying them.
Definitely. Yeah. Okay, well, let's hear about, this podcast is called Your AI Roadmap, so people can, work on where they want to head. What was your career path to getting into what you do now?
Yeah, it was like somewhat of a, I'd say, interesting twist that sort of woke me to the power of AI. I've been in tech pretty much all my life, and most of my early career was in the corporate side of things, larger public companies where I'm running business units and building products, software, hardware, everything else, but largely looking at scaling, growing product lines, and among other things, and including innovation for sure. Startup world is obviously very different. I also, moved out of the corporate when I was presented with a very unique opportunity to do a turnaround, which I thought was incredibly challenging and also is going to be a lot of fun. So this is a long story short. This was a very well-established 25-year company that had been in business for 25 odd years and had gone from its peak of $500 million in revenue to, at that point, it was, I think, like 30 million in revenue with 300 million of debt and losing 100 million a year, negative 100 million EBITDA. And so it was really bankrupt. And the investors had close to $500 million of investment that they were necessarily looking to write off. And it was going to go Chapter 11. And so there were believers who thought it could be saved, and a team was put together to go make it happen. And so that's how I left the corporate world to go work on the turnaround. Long story short, we took it to profitability very quickly, negative 100 million to plus 12 EBITDA in about 2 years, 110 million EBITDA improvement, and eventually to its IPO. IPO'd at 4 billion on the public market. So that was a great run. And after that, I really wanted to do a startup. And the startup idea I had was to take a vertical SaaS in an old school archaic space, build a vertical SaaS for an old school archaic space, and just reinvent that particular sector. So we built a very specific software system for the specialty chemicals market. And this initial brush with machine learning and AI around that time, but I hadn't looked deeply into it. But I met a couple of smart guys who were fresh graduates, and they were marketing themselves as ML engineers. And I was like, okay, we want one of those. Do you want to come work with us? And they're like, yeah, sure. I mean, they came as a pair, and they joined our company as ML engineers. And we had no idea what to do on the ML side. And we sort of went on our merry way. And I remember 6 months in, I mean, these two guys walk into my office and they're like, why are we here? What are we doing? And I was like, okay, I mean, like, you hired us to, build AI. I mean, we're just building regular software. We're doing this, like, same stuff as everybody else. It's not why, we joined this company. I was like, okay, well, what can you do? And they're like, give us a complex problem and maybe we can solve it. Like, you could focus on that. So we came up with like very interesting use case, right? So there was this unique aspect of that workflow in the software that we had, where you had to make a guess of what the price of a commodity would be for quotations and profitability, and you do it based on industry trends. But if your guess is wrong, you're going to lose money even if you got everything right. And if the guess is right, I mean, you eventually build a product that's profitable. And so we figured, okay, like, can you go predict what the price could be? I mean, you have all this data. Can you build an AI model? I mean, build a crystal ball. Build them in a crystal ball we can see in the future using AI, using machine learning. And the goal was like, okay, maybe you can go as far as like, 3 weeks out or 6 weeks out. The actual software system required close to 12 weeks. But we didn't know. And so these guys went off and came back after like a couple of months with something that was working. And we looked at it, and it was, not too far out. It was like a week and a half in the future. But it was very accurate. I mean, and they built these early models where they were like predicting the price of, say, titanium dioxide on the spot market, not today, but a week from now. And I mean, they were delivering that level of accuracy between like 80% to 85% back, this was like the first stab at it. Or like, wow, I mean, if you could get this to like maybe 6 weeks, maybe 10, maybe 12, and the accuracy a little higher. I mean, and they built it, we got it, and the rest is history. I mean, Tides got acquired really quickly after that. But I was like, okay, we got to pay attention to this thing. And this was years ago. I mean, and 2016-ish timeframe. And for me, it was like, okay, I mean, this is what I need to focus on. And behavioral signals was the next progression. AI, for the uninitiated, is just a buzzword. And if you're in it and you're looking at it, you're getting surprised by it every day. Every day. You're like, I mean, in fact, some of the things that we're doing ourselves on the behavioral signal sides are just mind-boggling. I mean, we get our own like sort of like shock moments in our mini, like, how's it working? Why is it working? Like, let's understand it. It's working. That's great. But like, the power is tremendous of what we can get there, or, what we can get out of this capability.
That's awesome. Yeah. Wow. I didn't know about all your bigger finance stuff in the past. That's awesome. Okay. So what if someone's listening to this and they're like, whoa, I want to get into this. Heck yeah, let's go. What are action steps, advice you might have for them? What would you say to that person?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, I mean, if you are a technical person, brush up your Java and Python and go start to fool around with some of the open source models that are available, just to get the hang of, where you can take it or where you can go. I mean, there's tremendous gap in the demand and supply in the market today. So if you're a good ML engineer, you have a career ahead of yourself, and it's well worth the investment. If you're an entrepreneur, there are some exciting opportunities. Like, so for example, I mean, as I said, like, so the industry is working towards a goal. And there's a lot of different pieces that are still unsolved for. There are pieces both on the enablement side, but also on the technology side, right? And so one, if you understand what those missing pieces are and you can fulfill those, right? If you can bring in, a solution for some of those, that's a tremendous entrepreneurial return awaiting you, and also satisfaction that because you actually meaningfully contributed in some way. So I think it's a very exciting time. I mean, I'd say we're living through history in a very meaningful way. We're literally seeing I'll say this, right? From Jan 23 to December 23 is a very different world. You may not see it if you're not paying attention, but it's a very different world, and the change is drastic. And I think, you see the same. We're sitting here in Jan, and by the end of this year, it's going to be a very different world. I mean, with what's happening in this space, I mean, the pace is. That's why people are concerned, because it's moving so fast, which is a real concern, of course. But yes, I mean, so it's a very exciting time. I mean, we're looking through this transition. I mean, if you're like looking 10 years out, it's hard to visualize how would we do the things that we're doing today, the tools that we're using today. I mean, how we're living our lives today. How would that be 10 years from now? We can't, I mean, a lot of that would just be completely different. And 10 years is like, it's going to be here before you know it. I mean, it's going to be in our lifetimes, hopefully, right? Definitely yours. I mean, and just saying, so that's fun and it's exciting, right? I mean, I don't think a lot of people get to live through that. I mean, that switch, that time frame, it's definitely bigger than internet in factor of many, for sure. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've heard people say something akin to, this is the slowest it's ever going to go.
Yeah, that's a good one.
and it's kind of like...
but it's interesting, yeah. That's a good one, yeah.
But I think also, as you mentioned, you could become a machine learning engineer. You could find a problem and really work on that solution, whatever that may be. I've also heard, I don't know how much I believe in this, my CTO laughs really hard. Will there be coders in 3 to 4 years if most of what's on GitHub today is already generative, like something like 80%. I need to actually
coders. Will there be radiologists? Do we need paralegals? There's a question that you can ask for about, half of the careers that exist today, if not more. I mean, we know we'll need a gardener. We'll know we need a plumber 30, 40 years.
I don't know.
So that's a funny thing is like, so, I mean, most of the impact is on the white collar jobs, not the blue collar, because robotics is just simply lagging tremendously, right? So we just don't, it's not, I mean, the time where we have a physical robot that does everything like as a human, it's got miles away. But on the software side, like, I mean, if you're a radiologist, which is one of the most high paid and most complex fields of medicine. I mean, ChatGPT is solving for radiology better than most radiologists do. I mean, it's detecting tumors and, and so do you need a radiologist then? I mean, because it's a perfect job for AI. I mean, you just look to lots of data, put towards all that experience and come back with, here's your assessment of what the problem is. Paralegals. I mean, I've created now multiple legal entities, nonprofits, etc., by documentation created purely from ChatGPT without any modifications. And these are early days. So I'm just saying, I mean, a lot of those things are, I mean, coders, as you said, right? I mean, if you're just a regular coder, if you're just a basic coder that's doing front end and this and that, you're in trouble, unless there's other value that you can add. Yeah.
Right. Well, and even debugging, I've hired a coder or just
that's a good one.
This concept of human in the loop, or kind of, right, what is the value add you're providing? If I can get code spit out from something else, and my job as well, anybody's job. But my CTO and I have been joking about this, and she's like, just because cameras came out doesn't mean that painters are no longer relevant. She sees them as different variations of this. But I do think of, what's future-proofed? Where is the human in the loop? Do our lives need to be 9 to 5s, chained to computers? I think, as you mentioned, we're going to see wild changes in the next 3 years, amongst other things. Yeah.
Crazy wild. Yeah.
Well, crazy wild. Is there other advice, things you might recommend for folks, resources to check out?
Yeah, I mean, I find the most accurate information in this space is, with very few, small group of people. There's just a lot of fluff in this space, but there's a small group of people, and I don't want to call them out to embarrass them. I work with some of them in the industry, but it's not like, there's like, I'd say like 50 people tops, right, in the entire industry know what they're doing, really won't know what they're doing and building. I mean, you go find those who people are and follow them, listen to their podcasts, listen to their talks, listen to what they're writing on Substack. And that's the best way to educate yourself rather than, going after sort of like, the usual fluffy stuff and the media stuff, because most of it is just regurgitated or it's inaccurate. It's also out of date. I mean, if you're looking at something from 12 months ago, well, it's out of date already, right? So that's my best advice for someone who's really technical and is, looking at, say, how do I keep up I'd like, have a list of 10 people, 15 people who you vetted and believe you know that these guys know what they're doing. I can give you that list privately, not publicly. I just follow them and I listen to what they have to say, and they're not all agreeing with each other, but they're all original ideas and original thoughts, and things are moving really fast, and it's it's a lot of fun.
Well, yeah, and that reminds me of the phrase I keep hearing also is like trust is the new data. And those humans that we trust and I agree with you, they don't all agree, but they at least have a point of view and they're practitioners in our field. And I think that's what's really crucial.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, if people want to find you, if they want to learn more, where should they go?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn, or go to our webpage. If there's a business related thing, I also have my own personal sort of page. You could just throw a note there. I mean, if it's non-work related, if you want to just talk about some technology stuff, throw me a note. Email comes to me and we can chat.
Well, we'll have all those in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time. I really love talking to you.
Thank you, Joan.
Cheers. Oh, gosh, was that fun? Did you enjoy that episode as much as I did? Well, now be sure to check out our show notes for this episode that has tons of links and resources and our guest bio, etc. Go check it out. If you're ready to dive in to personalize your AI journey, download the free Your AI Roadmap workbook at yourairoadmap.com/workbook. Well, maybe you work at a company and you're like, hey, we want to grow in data and AI, and I'd love to work with you. Please schedule an intro and a sync with me at Clarity AI at higherclarity.ai. We'd love to talk to you about it. My team builds custom AI solutions, digital twins, optimizations, data, fun stuff for small and medium-sized businesses. Our price points start at 5, 6, 7, 8 figures, depends on your needs, depending on your time scales, etc. If you liked the podcast, please support us. Can you please rate, review, subscribe, send it to your friend, DM your boss, follow wherever you get your podcasts. I certainly learned something new, and I hope you did too. Next episode drops soon. Can't wait to hear another amazing expert building an AI. Talk to you soon. Welcome to Your AI Bootcamp. This is a 4-week intensive bootcamp where we'll be working on goal setting, a professional glow up, crafting your story for other people to hear you better and getting credit for your work. And lastly, a demo day, coffee outreach, expanding your amazing network to hit your goals faster and be seen. Your AI Bootcamp is where your AI career begins and takes off. Come join us. yourairoadmap.com/career.